Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I think we all woke up to the same news this morning. The news that we all feared that was going to happen, and that's the PSA pricing update. Some of us, are heavily disappointed. How can they do this? There was just recently a price increase, but they're going to do this again. It just discourages everyone to get their cards graded. But some of us are actually happy because this could be a potential sign that our cards will now get graded faster. Whatever the case may be, I want to walk you through in this video what happened behind the scene at PSA to come to such a price update conclusion. It's not all pretty, but I do this for a living where I take laundry list of assumptions and a revenue target or a gross profit target or a income target that is set at a company level and understand what must be done in a trade-off to achieve the target that we have either promised to the street or internally. And in this case, with Nat Turner's acquisition of PSA, I think a lot of collectors had high hopes that it's going to be good for the hobby, for someone who's so passionate about the hobby to take over that, only positive things were going to come. But of course, a lot of skeptical investors and hobbyists knew that when Nat Turner takes over and his investor group along as well, that it's not going to be a charity service, right? And everything comes at a cost, and there are going to be things that are going to improve through this price increase, and I'll walk you through that in this video. But understand that this is a profit-seeking investor group, and they're not just going to stay still or give out free money. So let me walk you through that, but let's just assume before going into the video that Nat Turner and his group of C-suites had two goals in mind when they acquired PSA from Collectors Universe. Number one, to ease the pain point of majority of the collectors right now who are sending in their cards to PSA, which is the turnaround time. They wanted to make sure that under the straining circumstances that they're in right now with COVID restrictions and whatnot, that they are able to improve that turnaround time as much as they can. I mean, the naming of those services are 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, 10 days, 20 days, but we're kind of looking at 1 year, 5 to 6 months, 2 to 3 months, 1 month, etc. So they probably want to make sure that that is improved in the next year since acquisition. And number two, making sure that they're not making any less money than PSA has brought in the last fiscal year. Obviously, last 12 months has been crazy in terms of the hobby in general. So PSA saw and reaped a lot of fruits from that. But I'm sure Turner and Co are not going to expect anything less than what is organic, but want to bring in more. So those are the two key goals that I think they were trying to achieve through this pricing update. So let's get started right away. So in this video, I'm actually going to draw out some of the graphs that is in my head. So apologies for the manual graphs here, but it's a very urgent and timely matter that I think should be discussed and be known to a lot of the investors and collectors out there. So here we go. An article by GlobeWire, because Collectors Universe is a publicly traded company, their financials are released every quarter, and Collectors Universe, which is the head company of PSA, are on a fiscal year calendar year, meaning that their 2021 fiscal year actually began or ended at September 30th of 2020. So they already have the Q1 results for 2021 fiscal year. So what they said in this report is that they saw a 130% year-over-year increase in quarterly revenue in Q1 of 2021. And Q1 again for them is basically last year. And that number they reported is basically going from 8.1 million the year before to 18.6 million this quarter. So just to simplify things, let's just assume here, right? I hope I'm in the camera here, that in year 2020, and this is going to be fiscal year, and this is going to be revenue, dollars. let's just going to assume that they did 8 million-ish, per quarter, which turns out to be, let's just call it for simplicity's sake, 30 million in 2020. Well, that's a very terrible graph. But anyways, 30 million in 2020, and then in 2021, with 130% year-over-year growth that they have already achieved in Q1, which they will want to see for the rest of the year. Let's just assume that that rounds up to a 70 million goal that they have here. And also, don't forget that they're probably going to have to hire a couple more people to grade these, volume of cards that are coming in. So let's assume that's, about 2 million. So that's about $50,000 a year of salary, along with about 40 people of that. So let's just cut out the 2 million from here. So they have essentially a gap here of 2 million plus 40 million. That gets to a 42 million gap that they need to fill in order to achieve a 130% year-over-year growth that they already saw in Q1. And I think that's not unrealistic, right, given how the hobby has been going. And so let's understand why, in order to get this 40 million or 42 million, they had to change the price increases. So for simplicity's sake, let's just assume that there's only 4 tiers of PSA grading. First one being economy, second one being regular, third one being express, and fourth being super express. So why I make it simple, just to prove a point here of why they kind of suspended some of these different tiers for temporarily and have changed the price for that. So let's just assume right now, and this is just my feel for it, that right now when we look at volume of cards that are sitting at PSA, and then we also look at the revenue that could potentially be driven by those graded cards, is probably inverse. What do I mean by that? I'm assuming here that about 70% of the cards sitting at PSA is at economy level, but those actually are only representing about 30%. That looks more like 25%, but you get the point, 30% of revenue in actuality. So it's kind of an inverse relationship where a lot of the work is going into the economy level subs, right, by the PSA employees, but they are actually accounting only for 30% of the revenue. Let's just assume here that regular takes up, 15% of this pie, and express takes 10%. And this is all volume of the cards, and then 5% by super express. So that's the volume distribution that's at a high level, very simple, that I'm thinking that's currently sitting at PSA, but the revenue may be completely inverse, and perhaps like 40% might be coming from regular and 20% from express and 20% from super express. So as you can see, this is not a correctly distributed pies, because this volume, it doesn't matter if a card is in the economy category or a super express category, because to an employee at PSA, it takes the same amount of that person's time, right? So how do you make that more efficient? And so the goal here is to achieve higher revenue again, and to reduce pain points. And some of you, and just to note here, some of you think that just because there's a lot of cards sitting at PSA that they're making a lot of money. That's actually not true, because according to GAAP, which is the accounting principle that governs most of the corporations here in the United States, revenue can only be recognized in a company's financials when it is rendered, when the services or goods that were promised were rendered. meaning that just because you paid for a service, if the cards haven't been graded yet, it's not considered that the services have been rendered. So those sit in, sort of prepaid revenue, which is not the actual gross revenue that gets reported in company financials. So just FYI, whatever cards that are sitting in the PSA headquarters, those are not in their books. So just to throw that out there. So given this inverse relationship, this is a very, very bad situation for any company. You're putting in majority of your employees' time on something that is least fruitful, basically, right? So what is the takeaway from this exercise? Is one, we have to reduce the volume, right, of cards that are going to come in. That's period. Because right now they're so backlogged, right, that they have to play the catch-up game for the next several months, if not for the next year. So reduce the volume of cards, and specifically reduce the volume of cards from the lower tier submission. So as you can see from the PSA's website, they have halted the economy level submission right now, and regular is going for $100 a card. So that's a huge change. I think just 6 months ago, it was at $25, if I'm remembering that correctly. So takeaway number 2 from Nat Turner and his crew behind the scene. Free up time, like I mentioned, by its employees, right? Sorry for the stick figure there. To grade higher revenue generating cards. So again, what that means is every minute of these people's time at PSA is treated equally, whether they grade an economy level sub or a super express or express level sub. So make sure that they are doing that work, because the per minute profit from that is way higher than a bulk submission at an economy level. So takeaway number 3 is, okay, so if we reduce the volume from economy, right, and regular subs, they're going to see a revenue loss. Even though it may just be a 30% of the whole revenue pie, they're going to see a reduction in that. I mean, let's say this just goes down to 0. What are they going to do to mitigate that loss? In order to mitigate that loss, by increasing price. And this is pretty, for any of you who have studied economics or have been in any kind of pricing, field. I mean, it's really simple, right? Like, I mean, it's just number of cards, right, times the amount that they charge per card equals their gross revenue. And so if they're going to reduce the overall number of cards so that the time of PSA employees can be better spent on the higher priced cards or higher cost cards, how do we make sure that our gross revenue continues to go up? We have to increase the price, right? And it may come in as like a brutal story for you, but let's be real. You can't make everyone happy. But I think in this case, by the team behind the scene, what they have done here is you make the collectors happy by doing this, right? Because now you're going to get faster turnaround. Your 10-day sub now may come back in a month, versus 6 months, whatever it may be right now. So it makes the collectors happy. And then, of course, price increase and gross revenue increase, it makes the investors happy. And here I'm talking investors of PSA, Nat Turner and his company. So again, not the best case scenario, but I think in order to achieve, again, those 2 primary goals, to make the collectors happy by giving faster turnaround, and 2, increasing revenue at 130% year over year, as they have already seen in Q1, and sustaining that growth is probably a number one goal for Nat Turner and his investor groups. And so it just has to be something that has to be done. And there may be another price increase, in my opinion, that may come in the later half of the year, who knows. But I think overall this is generally healthy for the hobby, because you're no longer going to have hundreds of your cards locked up in the PSA headquarters in Santa Ana, nor should you be sending hundreds of RJ Barretts, Rui Hachimura. And nothing against these players, I love them, and I've personally sent those cards in, but am I going to do that now? Probably not, because I'm not going to get these cards graded to hit a loss on them. And if you are a collector at heart, and we all have different reasons of why we collect, but if you're a collector at heart, might as well keep them raw and keep them in good condition, right? And it's not like when the 96 Kobe came out, not everyone went to go get them graded. You just keep it and look at it, collect it. When it comes time to actually get it graded, right? And I get another question that's pretty interesting is, do you think that this is going to be the fall of PSA and other grading companies will come into play in relevance? I don't think this will personally move PSA's reputation or popularity by any means. I think either it'll sustain or it'll actually get even more popular now that there will be proportionately less PSA graded cards out there. But it may introduce lower tier grading companies for sure. I know some of them are out there. I've never personally used them, but in order to get like I mentioned, anything below like $1,000 card, it might make sense to send them into those other services in order to just authenticate them and show that they are in good condition, right? I think PSA now has gone beyond the, hey, this is real, nothing has been done to the card and it's in good condition, but it's really just a brand name that gets attached to PSA. And I think that's why PSA 10 is valued way more than say a BGS 9.5, even though knowingly we all know that BGS has a stricter grading sort of rubric. But I do think that whether it's Pokemon cards or some of these lower tier cards, when I say lower tier I mean more affordable in general, can see a spike in grading and getting slabs from other grading companies other than like PSA or BGS. So that's my take. And like I said, this is what I do mainly for my day-to-day, and I've done this for quite some time now. And so this is probably what happened behind the scene, in a quick turnaround for sure. It hasn't been that long since the new company took over PSA, but I do feel like this is in general the right direction for the hobby, so that we're not waiting, we don't have our cards locked up in a building, but also for investors to come in, they want to see profit out of that as well. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy my stick figures, and I will see you guys in the next video.